We're going to call to order the Hanson Planning Board meeting for August 28th, 2023 here at 6:30 p.m. in the Select Board Meeting Room, lower level of Town Hall. Prior to starting the meeting, I want to read tonight's preamble. I hereby call on August 28th, 2023, a meeting of the Town of Hanson Planning Board to order at 6:30 p.m. I would also like to announce for all those in attendance that this meeting is being recorded for distribution of Wyken Hanson Community Access, playback times, and other related information on this recording can be found at whca.tv. Calling to order, the board members that are present are all board members except for member Beninato. We also have the town planner, and the town planner administrative assistant is with us as well this evening. For the folks that are here in the audience, please make sure to do some clerical procedural things for us. Silence your cell phone. Make sure that you're signed in on our sign-in sheet that's over by the entry door. And if there affords an opportunity to speak, make sure that you state your name and address for the record nice and clearly so we can annotate that within the minutes. The first item of business on our agenda this evening is a 6:30 p.m. public hearing, continued public hearing for Meadowbrook Farms residential subdivision, 0 County Road, Assessors Map 74, Block 0, Lots 7 and 8, applicant Ellis Builders and Development, representative Morse Engineering Company. And for the record, as we do, as a runner, just to have on the record that our own member, Mr. Ellis, does not have any affiliation with the applicant Ellis Builders and Development. Just make sure to put that on the record. Thank you. Welcome. Town Planner.
Mr. Chair, so this evening, Mr. Morse is here from Morse Engineering, and Eric Donardo is here from representing Verdantis, who've been doing the peer review work on behalf of the planning board on this project. So what I'd like to do is have Mr. Morse, there was 2 letters in your packet, basically a second peer review and a third peer review. Third peer review states that the applicant has pretty much met all the requirements and all the changes that have been required by our peer reviewers, the Verdantis. What I'd like Mr. Morse to do is just basically take the second peer review letter and just touch on, what changes you've made, what sheets they're on the plan, and I can call them up for you on the screen, and we can discuss that. The biggest thing, obviously, has been for this project is the drainage and the detention basin. So maybe if you want to focus on that, and then Mr. Donardo can also address Verdantis' position regarding the revisions.
Great. So we're talking about 2 review letters. The second that the town planner is referring to is stamped into the board office June 26, 2023, and the second letter is stamped in August 16th, 2023. So, Town Planner, you want to start with the second letter first?
We'll start with the June 26th letter.
Sure.
So if you can, Mr. Morse can just address the changes that he's made to the plans in response to Verdantis'.
Sure. For the record, Gregory Morse, registered engineer with Morse Engineering, representing the applicant. This is a 9-lot definitive subdivision, Meadowbrook Farm. Obviously, we've gone through the peer review process. The last 2 iterations of the plan weren't really substantial changes in the overall layout. It remains a 9-lot subdivision plan with 2 roads, access off of County Road. What we did, though, is we went out, we performed some additional soil testing. We did additional test pits in the drainage basin area. We also did what's referred to as a double ring infiltrometer test with a witness from the Conservation Commission present to witness the soil testing. We've revised the drainage calculations based on the testing that was done, which essentially resulted in us changing the credit that we were taking in the basin slightly. We originally had infiltration credit over the entire stormwater basin area. We've revised our calculations so that we're only taking credit for the lower half of the stormwater detention basin area. That being said, those revised calcs and plans were submitted to your peer reviewer. I believe we've satisfied the outstanding comments that he's raised at this point, largely. I can go over any of the specific, minute details on it, but overall, the biggest change was with respect to the calculations of the drainage basin and how we were taking credit for the infiltration in that basin. It complies with DEP's requirements for rates and volumes of runoff, TSS removal. We provided an O&M plan for it for long-term longevity.
Mr. Chair.
Town planner.
Could you explain, at least so for the abutters and the board, that detention basin and how it's going to function?
Sure. So the
And please, you can approach the screen if you'd like to.
Sure. So the drainage system itself for this subdivision relies on the grading of the individual lots. You'll see that for the most part, the front yards of the lots drain to the street. Whether you're on this cul-de-sac or whether you're on this cul-de-sac, the front yards are draining out to the street. From the street, there's a series of catch basins. Here, there's a series of catch basins here. These catch basins convey the flow down to the upper portion of our detention basin. This is a 4-bay right here where it gets discharged. And then the water follows this here, which is a stone channel, all the way through to this outlet point. These lines here depict the contours or the outer shape of the basin itself. So you'll see that the basin meanders, so that way you're getting what's called TSS removal. That's total suspended solids within your stormwater. Road salts, sands, anything like that, have a chance to fall out within that swath before the ultimate discharge at this location, which discharges on our own site to a on-site bordering vegetated wetland area. The lower half of this basin, this area here, you can see it's slightly hatched or shaded. That's the area where we're taking credit for water being infiltrated into the soil. So we conducted soil test pits in the upper area as well as the lower area down here. The requirement is that you have a minimum of a 2-foot groundwater separation to the bottom of your basin. This complies with that minimum 2-foot requirement. The infiltration area there is the area that we're taking the credit for that soil. That double ring infiltrometer test, that was to measure the specific rate of the soil on the site here in place, what it will take for infiltration, as opposed to just pulling a number out of a book that's kind of a standard number. It was an actual in-place test that was done.
And if I may, Mr. Chair.
Absolutely.
That was done at the request of the conservation, my understanding, and the DEP?
Correct.
In the second review letter, Verdantis had said in their second paragraph to the end, they said, Verdantis requests that the applicant revise the details depicting a form of barrier to restrict potential exfiltration in the detention basin portion of the system drainage. Has that detail been updated?
That hasn't since that letter. That's this upper portion of the basin here, which we just have as a grass bottom in the basin. I didn't see that it was necessary to add that. Then we got the comment. We can certainly add that if you want. I think it's talk about either a rubber or a clay liner. I mean, I see it without it as just having that much more infiltrative capacity. I don't see that as a bad thing, in my opinion. But if you want a liner or something in that top, we're glad to do that. It wouldn't affect the calculations because the calculations don't include that top area for infiltration either.
Can I ask a question?
Mr. Kevin?
Can we have someone from Verdantis speak to what he just said? Is that possible?
Absolutely. Do I need to stand in front of a specific
Sure.
microphone?
Feel free.
Okay. Eric Donardo from Verdantis, project engineer. So yes, I did have a conversation with Mr. Jeff Hassett kind of regarding the last comment. The main point that we wanted to kind of introduce to everyone is that as we know, they are not taking credit within the upper portion of what's the detention basin. However, the entire bottom basin is the same elevation throughout, so the water is going to essentially pool. So our only concern is that there is not there's not the required separation in the upper portion, which is why that they're calling it the detention basin as opposed to the infiltration basin. So in actuality, there's potential, like Mr. Morris is mentioning, that there is potential for further infiltration. Our only concern is if there's infiltrating, there's no mounting analysis supporting any sort of surcharge going outward. So the idea is that if we were to provide some sort of impermeable barrier to ensure that that portion is only detention, then there's no need for the further mounting analysis.
And the reference that you're saying is the 83 feet. The 83 is even throughout. Is that correct?
Correct.
So that elevation of 83 is even throughout. Okay.
Can I ask one more
Mr.
question?
Kemp,
Joe?
absolutely.
It's somewhat unrelated to that portion of it. I know previously someone had mentioned that a lot of the grading on most of these lots, right, is part of the proposed absorption system, right? Like there's something up on this end over here on the right-hand side. Is that called out on the deeds of the properties in question where these things are? The reason I ask that is because I've seen on multiple occasions, especially in this town, where, you know, these things are designed like this and then people bring in truckloads of fill in because they want to level their yard. So I'd just like you to speak to that, please.
Sure. So these stormwater systems, including on the back of those top two lots that grass depression, are all part of the overall management system for this subdivision. These plans in their entirety, showing the drainage systems and the easements over all those lots, gets recorded at the Registry of Deeds.
Okay.
The plans will be recorded and then referenced on each of the individual deeds, as well as the certificate of action or approval that this board issues. And that will likely reference the operation and maintenance plan that we submitted with this, which talks about the operation and maintenance requirements of each of these drainage systems and how an HOA is going to be established, or in the event the town takes over it, but who's responsible for the maintenance. And it's an HOA that's responsible up until the town takes it as a public road, if that ever happens.
So will that upper portion also be part of the maintenance plan going forward, like, you know, with easements?
Yes,
So
it is.
the town will be able to access those as well?
Yes, it is.
Mr. Chair, if I might.
Town planner.
The houses that you're showing on here, Greg, are these houses that are the size that are going to be built, or just at this point used for the drainage design?
They're an approximation for the drainage design and overall grading of the lot. These aren't custom houses yet.
Is that the expectation of the applicant, custom, or?
The expectation is that they'll be, each house is going to be slightly different in this subdivision.
So that could change?
That footprint could change slightly.
And what effect, if any, would that have on the drainage design or runoff?
Given the size of the sub-catchments here and the amount of impervious that we have on the site, small changes to the footprint aren't going to have any measurable effect. Any large-scale changes to the footprints, which I don't see. Those houses there are, a little over 3,000 square feet in size, gross floor area. I don't see houses going in significantly bigger than that. But that could be mitigated by additional roof dry wells, for example, if we felt necessary.
What about any of the other changes that were significant or that you felt were outstanding?
In terms of the other changes, Morse Engineering has actually been very willing to essentially look at the revisions and reevaluate certain things. One thing to note is they did provide in this recent iteration a grass swale along the edge to better allow to the north, south, along the wetland edge right there to better kind of convey water so that we're not, it's not just kind of running off into the other wetlands to the east there, as well as just minor, call it revisional edits that were kind of just things that we noted, discrepancies between details versus plans. But on this most recent one, everything checks out. All of our comments were addressed. The last one remaining was just the detention basin versus infiltration basin. And we had communication back and forth on that.
If I may, Mr. Chair.
Absolutely.
Craig, has the conservation seen these latest revisions?
They have seen these. We presented these to them at their last meeting. We were ultimately continued till their September, the first meeting in September, I believe it's the 8th. Conservation did their own peer review. They hired a separate peer review engineer. They're satisfied with all of their comments at this point as well.
So as far as, Eric, the groundwater mounding analysis, you don't feel that it needs to be done as this is designed?
Yes and no, not to be. We're just saying that there's. If you go to the detail sheet,
What page?
sheet 22. So you'll kind of see the separation of groundwater versus the bottom of the basin on the detention basin portion. So our concern is that they don't have the 4-foot separation from the estimated seasonal high groundwater table. So that's why we suggested some sort of impermeable barrier, as opposed to just that's our only consideration. We'll defer to the board and to the conservation. Obviously, the conservation feels that the applicant addressed all their comments in terms of the redesign of the stormwater. It's just our only concern is that if there is infiltration, we understand that they are not taking credit of it, but if there is infiltration, is there any further impacts to the groundwater, given that it's only 2 feet of separation?
But if an impervious barrier is placed in that detention basin, Verdantis would be satisfied that they would meet the stormwater management and not be required to do the groundwater mounding analysis.
Correct, yes.
What's the will of the board in regards to having that barrier installed? That seems to be the big question on the table.
I think if it's being required, Mr. Chair, if I may, I'm not a voting member, obviously, but I would recommend that if it's being recommended by the peer reviewer, that it should be something that should be done.
More about the fact that there should be a detail, putting that in. Mr. Morse, do you think it would take you long to spin that around?
No, it would be very quick. I think it's something we could incorporate into an endorsement set if necessary.
Anybody on the board want to make a motion to support that?
I'll make the motion.
Motion's been made by Mr. Ellis,
I'll second.
seconded by Mr. Kemet in regards to the recommendation, following the recommendations by Verdantis in regards to the detail depicting a form barrier to restrict potential exfiltration in the detention basin portion of the system's design. Any discussion in regards to that motion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? 4-0-1. If you don't mind for a moment, Tom Thunder, can you pull up the waiver request?
Before we enter into this discussion, Joe, do you mind if I ask if Verdantis' thoughts on these?
Mr. Kemet?
Do you have any thoughts on these waivers? Have you seen them?
Yeah, no, I have. We actually, there were a few that, as we were reviewing the town bylaws, that just minor things that weren't addressed, but we do, all in all, agree with all the waivers. One specifically seems to be kind of difficult to maintain in terms of the freeboard associated with the detention. Yeah, exactly. But yes, we do feel that.
On the first request, I have the 7.4.32, item B. I believe that the regulations 2.6 2 feet 6 inches, not 2.5.
If it's 2 foot 6 inches, that's 2.5 feet in engineering speak.
Okay. So in our regulation, it does say 2.6 though.
Really?
Yeah, I believe it does.
Okay.
Yeah, you wanna pull that up?
I'd have to go find that. Give me a second.
And then that was the other question that I had, was what was Verdance's opinion in regards to the 4 foot, 3 foot? You know, it seems like it's a contradiction.
Yeah,
So-
it definitely does seem
Yeah,
like it's a contradiction.
Minimum depth of cover is 2 foot 6 inches. 2 foot 6 inches, it's not 2.6.
So 7.4.32.
It's on page 39.
Thank you. Seven dot four dot 32.2, item B. I don't know if we want to just clarify that. It's coming up to it. So that 2 foot 6 inches.
Yeah,
I don't
2 foot
wanna
6
clarify
inches.
that if
So-
that makes any difference in the language here on the waiver request.
It's just what they wrote is 2.5 feet engineering.
Yeah.
So that's all it is.
Okay.
Engineers, we use tenths, not feet and inches. So in essence, it's the same number.
Perfect. Well, I think that we have a pretty good amount of information to be able to move forward in perhaps the next meeting. You have an appearance before conservation on the 8th. Our next board meeting would be the 11th, tentative the 11th. Any other questions from the board before I open it up to the floor from the public? Any other questions from the town planner?
Not at this time.
Verdantis, any other points of order?
I do not.
Great. Open the floor to the public. If anybody has any public comment or question? Yes, sir.
Yeah, Bob Scott, 119 Home Street.
Mr. Scott, thank you.
On lot 2 and 3, you're showing a new swale and drainage in the back of the lot there. Are they situated 35 feet from the lot line? Or does that go right up to the stone wall?
They are set back from the lot line. Bear with me just a minute, I can give you a distance. So the swale is 20 feet from the lot line.
And does the vegetation need to be removed to put that swale and drainage in?
We're keeping a 20-foot vegetated buffer along that lot line and supplementing it with additional 6 to 8 foot high green giant evergreen screening.
There was a measurement on there, some 35 feet for the, for this drainage swale. Is that incorrect?
That's the overall easement. The swale is smaller contained within the easement.
And where's the house, going to be situated, back of the house will be situated, how many feet from the lot line?
From the lot line,
That would be on lot 2.
approximately 80 feet from the lot line on lot 2.
The back of the house?
Back of the house. The back of the garage is a little closer. The back of the garage is about 60 feet.
60 feet?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, I think it's 8 feet.
No.
He was saying
80
80 for the house, 60 for the garage.
Yeah. Okay, and the house then is gonna be situated approximately 9 feet above the current ground level?
Conservation purpose, 12 feet above.
Well,
So the existing ground surface in the middle of the house is at elevation 81. The slab is at elevation 83 and a half. It's a walkout basement in the back. The top of foundation is 91 and a half. We're filling in between the proposed cul-de-sac in front of the house. It's a walkout basement in the back. So we're digging down approximately 2.5 feet to make that happen.
it's a little bit of a drop, isn't it?
Thank you, Mr. Scott. Mrs. Scott.
Marion Scott, 119 Homes.
Hi, Mrs. Scott.
At conservation meeting the other night, we were told it would be 30 feet untouched of woods. Now you say it's 20 feet?
There's 30 feet of vegetation.
Well, 30 feet
30.
of vegetation would be left. I think it just mentioned that. You said there'd be no tree clearing within that 30 feet.
So that drainage easement out back is 35 feet. That swale has to be within that. So there's 20 feet of vegetation and trees undisturbed, and then there's the swale, which makes up approximately 10 feet, and that's grassed area where that swale is. That's what makes up the 30 or 35 feet.
Could you show me that on the drawing up there?
Sure.
What would be the easiest sheet for you to show that on?
Sheet 8 and sheet 10. So this is the back of lot 2. This is the lot line I think that you're questioning here. This drainage easement is 35 feet in depth. This here is the area where the swale gets constructed. So approximately 20 feet from the lot line to the swale is undisturbed, and there's proposed arborvitae to be planted in that area. And then the top, 10 to 15 feet of this is grass where that swale is. That swale is shown at the bottom of the grading and utility sheet, which is sheet 13. It's just kind of it's at a spot where it gets cut off from the page, but you can see it ever so slightly right here, this dashed line representing that 35-foot swale, or sorry, that 35-foot easement. These contour lines here represent that swale. So you see that that swale is way up on the subdivision side of that easement. This kind of scalloped shaped line, that's the proposed tree line, being 20 feet from your lot line, which is down on the bottom here. These here represent the additional 6 to 8 foot green evergreen screen that we would be planting.
The large pines and all that are in that 20 feet would be left,
Yes. Yeah, there's nothing proposed in that 20 foot.
except planting the evergreens around them.
Correct.
Yes, sir.
Keith Johnson, 96 County Road.
Hey, Mr. Johnson.
For the record, I oppose this project. I do have a question. Mr. Morse was just saying that these are going to be walkout basements. And within that walkout basement, they're going to have to dig down 2 feet. I'd like to know what he's going to do with that water once he hits it 2 feet down. Is that going to be pumped into the drainage system in this subdivision? Or is it just going to be dumped out into backyard through just an open pipe?
Mr. Morse, for clarification, are all proposed buildings walkout basements?
All of them are proposed as walkout basements, yes. They vary in depths of fill to construct or depth to excavate. The one closest to Mr. Johnson's house would be lot 1, the existing grade in the back. Behind the house is elevation 82. The slab of that house is at elevation 83, so it's actually a foot above the existing ground. We're not going to intercept the groundwater at all with that basement.
Is
So
that after you bring fill in?
that's when you construct the foundation. And then the front yard of that entire house gets filled in so that it drains out to the street from the front yard forward. From the ridge line of the roof back, drains back to the detention basin.
Mr. Morse, could you comment about lot 9?
Lot 9. Yeah, lot 9's on the opposite side of the street. Existing grade contour there. So the walkout in the back is at elevation 84 for the slab. Top of the foundation in front of the house is at elevation 92. The street, for reference, is going to be at elevation 90, so there's approximately a foot of grade across the front yard from adjacent to the foundation out to the street. The grade out back where the wetlands are, there's an 84 contour. So you're walking out on a slab that's essentially a flat backyard. Actually, this backyard, we're bringing it up to elevation 85, so you're stepping up approximately 2 steps from the basement up into the backyard.
Let me rephrase my question. What are you gonna be doing with the water that comes out of the sump pumps?
We're going into anyone's backyard,
Where's it going?
onto the ground.
So you're gonna pump the water out of the basement, and then it's gonna go back into the ground?
That's correct, it would infiltrate back into the ground. Honestly, though, on all of these, I don't see the need for sump pumps on
Well,
these
you don't live
houses.
at 96
Mr.
County Road,
Johnson,
sir.
Mr. Johnson, let the gentleman answer the question.
We've conducted extensive soil testing out here. On all of these lots, we have a minimum of 2 test pits. On many lots, we have 4 test pits, all witnessed by the town of Hanson, all done by a licensed soil evaluator approved by the Department of Environmental Protection to establish where the seasonal high groundwater table is. It's not our goal to make people have water in their basements. You know, we try to design these houses so that we're at or above water table in all scenarios.
The reason I'm asking is because I
Mr.
already-
Johnson.
Sorry, Keith Johnson, 96 County. The only reason why I'm asking is because I currently have a lot of water in my basement. And if these new houses are gonna have sumps, and those sumps are gonna be pumping with nowhere to go, that's gonna be more water in my basement. No matter how you look at it, that groundwater goes right across 0 County and right into my basement. No stopping. So I understand with the swales and the drainage that you're doing for us, but there's currently a problem with the groundwater. So unless you're gonna go under that groundwater, I don't know how you're gonna stop it on top of adding more to it with the sumps going. These people have no idea that their pumps are gonna be running 24/7. That's a lot more water than I think you realize, no matter how much analysis is done.
What do we have as the elevation for Mr. Johnson's property? Is it 83?
The problem I have is I've got a bowl in my backyard.
Yeah, 83, 82, 81, 80, 79.
Because my septic was built up the same elevation as 0 County, but between the septic and 0 County is a ditch. And that was to fill up, with or without a rainstorm.
Can I ask a question?
Mr. Kevin?
So isn't it possible to put some drawings of where the sump pumps may have to go if needed? I know, like, I've seen projects in the area where, you know, there are no sump pumps, but there's a pit there and there's a pipe that goes up into the sill, and just in case something might occur. So I'm wondering if that's something, you could include in there so that people could have some awareness that, if they were to need a sump pump, that there's a place to put it.
Yeah, I advise all of my clients doing new foundations to include crushed stone under the foundation, and include a sump hole for a future.
Okay.
I don't anticipate needing those sump pumps because of the volume of fill we're bringing onto this site.
Okay.
Because we've done the soil testing, we know how high we have to be. That's what ultimately is driving the volume of fill on this site, is so that I can keep the basements out of the groundwater table and keep the septics flowing by gravity. But yeah, we'll certainly be doing that in construction, I'm sure.
Mr. Chair.
Tom Planner.
Could you just maybe explain the process as far as, because you're bringing in all this fill, the roads and the foundations, the process of bringing in the fill and compacting it, assuming that this will all be material that's going to be compacted, there'll be stone underneath the foundations to be compacted. Could you just explain that so maybe the abutters and the board could get a better understanding?
Sure. So the project essentially happens in two separate phases. The first phase being the roadway construction. A contractor will be selected once plans and permits are in place to go out and build the road. They would install any erosion control barriers around the perimeter of the work. They would go in, they would cut down the trees, remove the stumps. They would stockpile the loam and the subsoil that gets removed, not from the entire site. We're not going to go in and clear cut the site, but just essentially from the road areas and from the drainage basin areas. Then the roadway material gets brought in. It gets dropped for the first portion right at the edge of County Road. It gets bulldozed onto the site in what we call lifts, approximately 12 inches of material at a time, and it gets compacted. Then they bring in another 12 inches of material and they compact that. During the process, there's a series of testing. You have to make sure that the material is tested as it gets compacted onto the roadway. Once it meets a certain compaction standard and it's brought up to the appropriate elevations, the drainage system and the utilities get installed under the roadway, and then ultimately the pavement goes down on top. But it's compacted in lifts, so it's not one fell swoop, bringing in all the material, and it has inspections along the way with testing results to ensure proper compaction under the road. Once the road is paved and once the supporting infrastructure is in place, the water main, the electric, the drainage that's supporting the road, we would be coming back to the planning board to ask for what's called a lot release. The lot release would then allow the contractor to begin construction on whatever lots they're seeking the release from. Those individual lots would follow kind of a similar process. They would have their own erosion control barriers put in place for each of the individual lots. And several of these lots are going to require further individual notice of intent filings with the Conservation Commission just because of their work within proximity of the wetlands. The lot would be cleared, compaction under the house would proceed in a similar manner. The foundation would be installed and then fill would be brought in between the foundation and the street to ensure the drainage system, is graded appropriately. When it's all said and done, my office, Morse Engineering, goes out. We do a complete survey of the property. We would certify on an as-built plan that the drainage system was built appropriately, that the grading is in compliance with the design plans. I would expect that the town would then have that peer reviewed just like they did with the design to ensure compliance, that what we did complies with the design here. Once that's ultimately done, several years down the road, the developer would be off the hook essentially and done with his project. So it's a long phased project in that regard, but it has several checks and balance points throughout its progression.
Mr. Chair. So will you be the ones doing the inspections and the compaction testing and providing results to the planning board of those tests?
So we certainly can do that. A lot of the towns that we do work in, they have their own engineering company that they like to have go out and do it.
That was gonna be my next question. Who's the applicant? I think the board should consider as a condition to have Verdantis be the oversight on that, to make sure that that road is compacted accordingly and meets the standard requirements.
So do we need a motion on that?
Whether it's tonight or.
Not necessarily tonight, I just want to clarify that.
Oh, okay.
There's some other documentation that needs to be updated between now and our next meeting. So. Any other questions or comments from the public? Ms. Scott?
Yes, an outlet from the basin that's going to then disperse the water into the current wetlands.
Yes.
You have the right to put more water into other people's property. We own a good section of that wetland.
So-
It's already flooded, so there's like a little stream up there. You can get even more water into that?
The answer is no. We don't have the right to increase the water off, and no, we're not going to be increasing the water off. When you do
How
a
much water getting out of that basin?
When you do a division like this, the Mass DEP stormwater standards are that you're allowed to discharge water at an equal or lesser rate than what happens pre-development and lesser volume than pre-development. And what we've done is with the calculations, we've shown that we're retaining enough water on our site within the grass depression area, within the infiltration basin. We're taking enough of that water out so that the discharge ultimately into that wetland is less than or equal to what exists today.
If it isn't, you're supposed to bond or anything to.
That would be something reported back to the planning board. We would need to deal with that for us to develop it.
To protect the abutters.
Let's go. Mr. Johnson?
I believe conservation is asking for a substantial bond, and then we're going to ask council about going about how they should do that. Not just during while this project is going on, but afterwards, when they're going to hand the project over to an HOA or the town. I know all the abutters are concerned that once this project is done, something catastrophic is going to happen 5, 10 years down the road, and there's going to be no recourse. So I just wanted to mention that's what conservation is asking for at the last meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Town planner, have you heard anything from conservation?
Yes, I had a conversation with Dr. Scallinger today, and he had stated that the conservation were going to proceed and look to, because they can under the bylaw, to implement a bond, I believe, on the detention basin, its construction and its maintenance for, I believe, the 5-year period that the applicant has discussed maintaining until you turn it over to the HOA or something to that effect. I don't want to put words in.
Sure.
I can't speak for the Conservation Commission, but that was the conversation I had with Dr. Scallinger.
Any other further questions or comments? Seeing none, entertain a motion for the board to continue until the next planning board meeting, when we have updates from Morse Engineering, as well as review from Verdantis. Motion's been made by Mr. Kemet, seconded by Mr. Cohen. Any discussions regarding that motion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? 401.
That can be continued to September 11th?
Yeah, a little tentative. But yeah, tentative September 11th. Mr. Morris, thank you for your time. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your time for attending.
Took the vote on that.
Thank you
It's
very much.
Kemet and Cohen.
Verdantis, thank you. I'm sorry. Josh? Eric. Eric, thank you. Sorry, I had a word.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Morris.
There you go. Thank you.
We're going to move along on our agenda to a little bit late, 6:45, 7:45 deliberation on the application for improvement to private ways, Snow Street, in conjunction with the proposed construction activity at 0 Snow Street, Assessors Map 1, Lot 1282, inclusive has been filed by Alan Diaz, trustee, in accordance with Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 40A, Section 81M of the Subdivision Control Law, and Section 12D of the Hanson zoning bylaws. For the record, I just want to let the public know we will not be taking any public comment this evening for this appointment. For the record, Mr. Ellis has recused himself from the meeting. Board members, we have, I'll wait for Mr. Ellis to leave. Let the record show 717, member Ellis has recused himself from the meeting room. Board members, we have with us tonight town council, based off of a few different requests that have come in discussions with the town planner, as well as some other offices here in town hall, in regards to getting some support from town council in regards to not only just the particular application that's before us for review, but also in regards to, I think, what will hopefully trickle over to any and other private ways issues or applications that we have regarding adequate access and improvements of private ways. So thank you, town council, appreciate your being here. I think that you had received some questions that the board had. I didn't know if you wanted to spend some time commenting on some of the stuff that had come across previous, and also, previous issues that we've had with this, specifically with this particular road, this particular private way.
Jay Taylor in Town Council. I didn't have any, I saw a few paragraphs of kind of related questions to the overall thing, confining kind of my discussions to what you have in front of you. I know that there were some existing remaining concerns over some site control issues. I saw that was out there. I don't really have the backup information on that, although I certainly understand it. Since I've been town council, I think close to 10 years, the improvement of this road has been an open question.
Right.
And I think the way it's before you, I'm not sure we ever have gotten to this exact point before. I think the project before you, I think there's two discrete questions. The first is a kind of, can you pass go thing? If there is a legitimate question out there, and I do not have the backup as to whether or not there's adequate site control to make these improvements, that's something I think you can request. I think that was also a subject of an opinion I gave on the kind of preliminary phase of this as to the adequacy of the way, where I suggested, and I think it was actually baked into your decision, as to whether or not the board could inquire and what the applicant's obligations would be in response to that inquiry to do the work that they propose to do, or the level of control to use, maintain, and improve and repair this particular private way. I don't know if any of that information has been forthcoming to the board on those particular issues. So that would be issue one. Issue two is more the technical. Is what they're doing, does it satisfy you in terms of the improvement to this way? I'm certainly no stranger to some level of controversy about the potential improvement of this way. And to the extent that there is site control here, I think that's the meatier question of the two. The first one I can answer, the second one you have to answer. Obviously, Tony's going to give you some assistance on that because he's got the expertise. You can do peer review on that if you needed to. It's all an open book, but those are the two discrete questions.
I suppose one of the biggest issues that we have is that the applicant came with an improvement to the private way. I believe it's up here, we see it up here. So the applicant came, but then the landowner basically negated any opportunity for the board to be able to pass not only negated the opportunity for the board to be able to possibly, put in favor an improvement to the private way, but also negated the town and started having.
I'm unfamiliar with that.
Right, so that was-
I've seen that premise
Right.
being made in emails.
Right.
I have not seen the instrument that is at the base of that. Certainly, if there was an injunction, certainly, I don't think anyone could enjoin the town unless the town were a party to an action. But if someone has an injunction, landowner and landowner, then let's see it, and so that I could evaluate it. I have not.
Yeah, it was just a discussion of permissions,
Right, there
verbal
was-
permissions. There was no.
Yeah, no, I mean, and so that's why, without all that information, I think it's fair and appropriate for this board to say, okay, there's an open question as to whether or not, from the beginning of those improvements to the end of those improvements, you have adequate control. Now, people that own property abutting away, unless the title says something different, generally have the rights to improve the way that they abut on within limits. However, the title itself sometimes says something different. I don't know that. I think if I'm a landowner and I'm about to invest a lot of money in the improvement of way, and it ain't cheap, then I think I would be well versed in my title to do so. And I think you all, in that the public would be, wouldn't be a public way, but in that the public would likely have access to it, should feel comfortable inquiring about that and requiring that level of proof, which if there's counsel involved on the other side, and I think there is, or on the applicant side, they can produce title to demonstrate that. And if someone else in the public thinks that they have an argument against that, that's why we're in a public hearing.
Right.
So that's why we should have at it. But I can't, the fact that someone says they're prohibited, that's not the case. And the action that we had with them on the first leg of this didn't resolve those issues.
Right.
That was an action as to whether the appeal was more or less timely. So we never got into the meat of those kinds of
Didn't have
questions for the court's consideration.
Yeah, it didn't happen.
Yeah.
Any questions from the board members?
Mr. Chair.
Town planner.
So my question to council is, so the applicant he filed an adequate access determination, which he received a negative.
That's right.
He's filed an improvements to private way application and the plan. So let's say he's following the regulations and is doing what the town of Hanson is asking him to do.
That's right.
The property that he has in question is actually up the street, top of the hill. His property drops away from the road, and he has a lot that will meet zoning as far as area and frontage. So I guess my question becomes, what can the planning board do here? Because obviously he's following the bylaw, and so the planning board would like to make a decision. Now, there wasn't a butter that said, I don't want him touching my property, but what is their claim? We haven't seen any claim. If the planning board moved forward with this and said, well, we're going to grant an approval because it meets the requirements, would a butter just have to file basically an appeal?
Well, they could file an appeal, so that would be one avenue. If an abutter felt, well, there's two reasons why a abutter might file an appeal. They might think that the planning board decided wrong on the brick and mortar issues here, so to speak, on allowing this roadway to be improved, that it's not safe or whatever. That's kind of a more generic appeal. They could also have a private action, and by way of kind of cleaning up the title, stating that this particular applicant doesn't have the rights to do what they propose. Now, the planning board can, but is not required to inquire about the title issues. There are several cases that suggest that the planning board can. In the subdivision context, there's actually a hard and fast obligation by way of case law where you're supposed to inquire, if this was a subdivision, as to the access to the main road or whatever it may be. You're allowed to do that. Here, it's no different. All of the zoning work that we do, one of the threshold questions, regardless of the kind of application that we're seeing, includes that kind of general premise. Do you have the rights to do what you want to do? I have no basis to second guess whether or not this property owner has the rights to improve this all the way down to their property. But I also have no grounds to say that they do. So if the planning board wished to inquire on that, fine. If the planning board wanted to focus just on the meat and potatoes of this, which is this a way that we think can be approved, and have they shown enough information here? It's a pretty thin plan at this stage, maybe you'll require more info. That's fine, and if private parties want to duke out whether they have the rights or don't have the rights, that would be a legitimate avenue for the board to take. So you don't have to immerse yourself in those questions. When I previously opined on phase one of this, I thought that direct question came up and I opined on that.
So the second part of this was the discussion, and has that attendee at that board, at the last board meeting, reached out, had any other communication?
No, that about it.
So the second side of this that I think really kind of threw the board itself into a little bit of a tizzy was the fact that they commented and said that they no longer would even allow the town. Now, obviously, public funds can't be appropriated and spent on a private way unless of a safety concern, of necessity.
Right, yeah, there's some avenues there.
Right, so, you know, and that's listing the select board to have a list of the private ways, and then determining whether a repair or improvement
And plowing.
right, would be of necessity. So one of the comments that was made was that there was a history of improper grading of the road by the town, you know, and that kind of put, you know,
I recall that.
Landowner saying that, you know, the town just continues to improperly grade the road, so the town's created its own problem. You know, that's why.
That's a separate question, you
Completely
know,
separate.
towns, Hanson wouldn't be the only town of all the towns
Oh, yeah.
that we represent where the DPW trying to do the right thing, where the streets person, whatever, does some grading on a private way. It is a pretty common occurrence whether the town has adopted operable statutes or not. Has nothing to do with this. And if the town came to us as council and said, should we keep grading this road, or are we in trouble because we graded it once, are we bound to do it again? I mean, that's a question I'll answer separately. That really has nothing to do with why you're here. And if someone felt that the town shouldn't be doing this work on a private way, okay, but we haven't been confronted with that, and they might be right that we shouldn't, or shouldn't have in the past, but here is, as is today, you have a job. And that job is, are they presenting a plan that you can wrap your hands around? And there's criteria for it. You may say that, hey, you could pave this thing in gold, and it's never gonna be satisfactory to us and the fire chief, and we just don't see it for X, Y, and Z reasons. Or you might say, we're finally here, and this person has presented a plan after all these years of us going back and forth on snow that we can wrap our hands around, and if you can build it this way, and I think there's still some work out there that would probably have to be done, maybe it's okay now.
Yeah, but I just didn't know, talking about that out of necessity, that term necessity, would the board's approval be backed by that issue of necessity? If the board
Separate issue, I would say.
completely separate issue.
Right, so this is just private stuff. Should the town decide in the future, in the proper way, through the acceptance of Chapter 40, Section 6N,
6.
that they want to allow a process whereby they can do temporary repairs of a private way out of necessity, either on their own or through petition and betterment process. Separate issue. The fact that this board puts their stamp of approval under this somewhat quirky bylaw has nothing to do with that.
Okay.
That is, you are not immersing yourself in the actual repair of it. You may make some long-term requirements as part of your condition, as to how, like, for example, how often, if the annual repair of potholes has to be made, just that basic O&M stuff.
Yeah, the select board, the biannual grading, snow plowing is.
Whatever, that, I would expect is the same as if this was a subdivision. When you approve a subdivision, it's private the moment you improve it. And you have all kinds of O&M requirements on that in your standard conditions likely and in your regulations. That's really no different here. There's no subdivision is the difference.
Right, right.
Can I ask you a question, Joe?
Mr. Kevin?
For me to make a decision going forward, I just have one real question, right? I know there's all kinds of talk about easements and all this other stuff, but if we have, the improvement to the road that's been, has an engineer's stamp on it, if somebody's looked at it and said, this will work, this gonna function correctly, right? And we have it peer reviewed by somebody else, then we're finished, we're done, because all we're doing is deciding whether, the improvements to the roadway are legitimate.
Yeah, I looked at that question, John, a little bit, just because I went over the bylaw again today, which
Sure.
I've gone over like 5 or 6 times over the last several years on this. And I wouldn't say it's as quite mechanical as that, but it's close. I would say if someone does their job and engineers this well and demonstrates that through auto turn analysis or whatever, that the fire trucks are going to get down and can get down, and it can handle the added traffic that might come along with improving the way. It seems like it's a little mechanical, similar to subdivision. If you design it the way we want to, then you get the approval. There is still some subjectivity in anything here, the same way there would be like in an A&R approval. If you felt, or the fire chief felt, or that the angles, the concerns, the one-way access, the width of it, it just isn't where you want roads to be. Do I think you get a certain amount of leeway on that and can decide? So it's kind of a reasonable person standard. If this board felt that the improvement of this roadway created issues for future potential safety issues in one way, shape, or another, either because it would open it up for more development or otherwise, you have the discretion under the bylaw. The bylaw is sufficiently broad to still say no. You lose some of the defense of those issues if an applicant comes and says, I've got a letter from your fire chief, I've got a letter from, Joe engineer, another engineer, fire code, all this stuff. If they do their homework, yeah, does it make it a harder decision for you to say no if you wanted to? It does. But like any other zoning decision where there's discretion involved, if you have a legitimate reason, doesn't matter whether the judge disagrees with you, you're generally going to get deference to that. So if you felt either that no was the appropriate answer or that there were substantial changes to this plan that would be required in order for you to say yes, if there's any kind of rational or reasonable basis for those, you're generally going to get the kind of deference you would as if this was a special permit or anything else like that, where you act under the zoning act. So, yeah, but the premise you're saying is right. I mean, this is 75% a technical review.
Yeah.
There's still
I'm trying to figure out, like, I want to go with empirical data, right? So that like the decision that I make isn't, for lack of the right word, capricious. It's like I just want to make sure that
is the word.
Clear.
Yeah.
That this is what we've signed up to do, right? We make that decision, and we let the engineers determine whether the culvert or whatever it may be is sufficient or not. And so that.
I think that's a legitimate take on things, John.
Okay, all right. Well, thank
Again, there's always a little gray area, and there's room for different interpretations, but that's why you're doing what you're doing.
Right. And for the record, I just want to make sure that it's in the minutes and that it's on the recording, that something designated in the town of Hanson as a private way doesn't mean exclusive. It just means that it's not accepted as a public road. So that's what this is here. It's not. So when we have abutters that are on the road, that are, you know, oh, I'm gonna put a sign up, a toll road, you know, whatever, stop sign. The private doesn't define exclusivity. It just defines it that it's not an accepted public way.
Yeah, I think it's binary like that, Joe. I agree with you that there's not a third category of way here.
Right.
It's either a public way where the town has taken full responsibility, lock, stock, and barrel,
Right.
or it's a private way.
We do have a little bit different caveat with Snow Street with the tax taking in 57, I think it was, 57, 63. So there is a little bit more involved with it, but it was never adopted as a public way. So it still remains private. Any other questions from the board?
I do, but I'm having trouble formulating it in my mind, so I just let it go. But I don't know, I guess, so for me, I know you touched on this earlier, that like there's the potential where the homeowner is going to refuse to allow anything to be done in that area. So for me, I have to be honest with you, when I make my decision, I think to myself, I don't care about any of that because it's really not my concern, right? My thing is to look at the empirical data of what's been submitted and make a determination based on that. So, you know, all kinds of people can kind of come in the room and say whatever they want. But, you know, without that data, I feel like, you know, I can't use that to make my decision.
That's a fair view of this. Now, look,
Okay.
if we had a deed flashed up on the screen right now
Mhm.
that proved or a court injunction that proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that the applicant doesn't have the rights to do that,
Mhm.
I think that'd be a different story because it might be a little compelling.
Mhm.
But how could you be in a position, it's not your job,
Right.
to assess the unknown or prove a negative?
Mhm.
It very well may be, at the end of the day, that this applicant does not have the rights, as has been kind of in the ether, but never on paper in front of you all, to do what they want to do. If that's the case, then that's likely going to come out in the wash.
Right. Well, we also try to maintain a level of being a board that makes decisions that doesn't, quote unquote, kick the can down the road. And so I think that's been a lot of concern, I would say, from the board is that, you know, is it just kind of passing the buck? And, you know, we always have to be.
Sometimes it's not your buck to
Yeah,
pass,
that's
right, or
Right.
to
Great point.
get to take in the first place. So I think that's a little bit what John's getting to.
Yeah,
There,
great point.
there are just title disputes that are front and center right in front of you. And I would always recommend, if it's open and obvious, don't say, well, I'll let them fight it out. If we knew, if we had
Sure.
that data right in front of us, I think you'd hear me saying like, hey, this one's a little, you know, too wonky for you to say yes to.
Sure.
We don't have that. I don't think we've ever had it. I've been hearing this stuff 3 planners ago, Tony, on this exact same question.
Yeah.
And we still don't have the kind of data necessary or the kind of title report or anything else to indicate that this just can't happen. And maybe it can. But I've never seen anything presented to this board to that effect.
And then one of the reasons why I wanted to heavily request that council comes in is because it seems as though we have had, or we should always have a concern that the private ways has always been kind of, as council says, it's in the ether, always in the background, something going on. So we've made some establishments and we've made some ground over the past months. The private way road signs, designating all the private ways as private way, that are private ways as private road signs. That way it allows residents and residents and then town itself to be able to know it's on a private way and help our highway department as well and emergency services know that if they're getting ready to turn onto a private way and there's 2 feet of snow, they can contact the highway department, you know. So it seems like this is going to kind of, I don't want to say kick the can down the road, but we're going to continue to deal with these. I mean, we have some issues on another private way in the town itself that came up last year and the year before.
And again, there was a lot of, assertions that people were making
Right.
about the reality of what was there
Right.
without any supporting evidence to support it. So here we are again with that
Yeah,
same.
it may be that
conundrum.
when you think about this and how to approach, and this bylaw is a little quirky, it's not totally unique because other towns have similar bylaws. It's a little quirky. It may be that you bake into the process at some point as part of the application materials that there be a title report by someone qualified to do it. And that way, on day one, we can see that someone, an attorney or someone else is certified the title.
Have you seen with other municipalities, something being implemented like a private road maintenance agreement, or I guess that's the better term that we come up with?
Well, so right now, I don't think that this applicant is gonna get the agreement.
No, this is just for general.
Yeah, I mean, when this kind of thing happens, you should, and it depends on how it comes up. So there's another context in which this comes up under some of the cases when people want to build out a private way that is shown on paper. So just a paper street for one house. And the building commissioner can say, okay, I'm gonna give you a building permit conditioned on you building it out a certain way. We would generally develop an agreement of some kind to do that. Here, I think as a condition of approval, you could certainly require, again, along the lines of that operations and maintenance, that there's not an agreement with the town. This is private. We don't wanna have a contract here, but they're going to provide some kind of instrument that they will be bound by, that would be subject to review by your town planner or your consulting engineer and perhaps legal counsel, that shows their commitment over time. We could require that it gets recorded or whatever it may be, just so that there's some track record, something to rely on when we see the potholes. And then it's weird because it becomes zoning kind of enforcement at the end of the day. But we could probably backload the process through your conditions to a degree.
I mean, a lot of private ways of answering it. Any other questions or comments?
I think I covered everything I was hoping to ask.
Any questions from the top planner?
If the board was to move on this evening, they're a 5-member board, and they only have 3 members here tonight, can they?
I didn't see anywhere in this bylaw where it indicated that it was a supermajority. It's not a special permit. That's not the other kind of quirky element of this.
Yeah, I mean, I don't consider this as we'll say a statutory requirement, like a subdivision or something like that.
Right. This is just simple majority, so it's going to have to be unanimous.
Yes.
But yeah.
Yeah, I didn't see anything in there. So.
Yeah, I just want to.
Yeah, no, it's a good, right. It's good to know.
So,
There's that little oddball time, 60 days from the
Yeah,
close of the hearing.
right, 60 days. So that would put us at October the 13th. So the board can either make a decision this evening, or you could continue it and say on September 11th, if you choose to make it September 11th, and then I can put together a decision. What would be your suggestion, Jay?
If you wanted to, I mean, I'm happy to review, as you all know, whether myself or Kate or someone else in the office, Brian, who's done a lot of work for the land use boards here too, we'll review. You want to just send us a bunch of bullet points and work with Tony to review a decision, draft something up, help out, however you want to do it. I think this one's tricky enough. I mean, it's pretty straightforward in some respects, but if you wanted to say yes with some conditions, and you could bullet point a few of your ideas for that, then we're happy to help put some flesh on that.
Administratively, for the plan itself, one of the things that I noticed, I believe on the second lot in, I think there's another existing dwelling that's on that lot. Okay. You can see that. If you had a second, Tony, to pull up, maybe Google Earth. I don't know, clerically or administratively, how much that.
So Joe, I know you're heading in a direction. I just wanted to ask a quick question before I forget. So what it sounds like to me is that we have the option where we could approve this evening, right, with conditions. But at this point, we're not really 100% settled on what those conditions are going to be. So what's the process for us to create those conditions that we're looking for? And
So,
have, because I'd like to have, you know, town council review those to make sure that they're actually, you know, allowable.
yeah, and the improvement surprise rates, one of the things that we need to look into is a peer review
Yep.
and bond,
Okay.
if applicable.
So what about legal fees as well?
We generally, I don't think that our work on this is, I'm not trying to create more legal fees that
Okay,
we don't
nice.
have to bear. We generally do, those things generally are not chargeable under the statutes that allow you to charge them back for engineering review.
Okay.
I don't think that in terms of it's just review of what you're doing and helping you to do some drafting, it's a particularly heavy lift, John.
Okay.
So I
I
think
just
we're
wanted to be sure.
comfortable with that. No, it's a good question.
There you go.
I see that second lot in, is I believe that structure is on the layout, but I don't believe the structure behind it is.
This lot here,
Yes, sir. Second lot in.
this would be the layout based on the GIS.
Right. So go back to the proposed plan.
Second.
I believe that this is, one of the, and I said it's only got the one existing dwelling. I believe that this is where somebody had made a comment about, there's a building that's in the middle of the road and,
I think this building here,
Yeah,
maybe this building here.
yeah.
That's what you're looking at, and not this. Yeah, so this building would be what's represented on the,
We have to get that
Right
clarified. We have to get that clarified. And then
I
there
mean,
was
it's not in the layout.
Right.
I mean, the registered land surveyor put his stamp on this, and he's claiming that's where the lines are, that's where the existing traveled way is.
Yeah, it seems to me there's a lot more going on in front of that, at the intersection of Monpont, with the driveway and,
Paved driveway.
based on the layout that we just saw on the ortho, something's not right there. But, that's not really for this
Correct.
here, this is for another, a different, meeting,
No, that's about right. That's it, right here, there's one driveway and there's the road, so.
Well, I'm
Sir-
saying
sir-
based on the layout,
Survey.
something's not right.
Yeah, but that is long, every plan I've seen in any file regarding Snow Street, that's what it shows. That house is there. So that's long,
In the right of way.
yeah,
And
it's
it's always been that.
and it's always been
Okay.
like that, so.
My council put that out there in the right of way. Any other questions for town council? Mr. Talbot, thank you very much. Appreciate your
course.
counsel. Appreciate you coming in, spend some time with us.
Yeah, are you gonna deliberate a little more tonight, or are you gonna do that the next time, or? I'm happy to stick around if you're gonna deliberate.
Yeah, it's up to the board.
I don't know, I guess the big question in the room is, what conditions are we asking for? And, what those gonna look like so that they can be written.
Right.
And, given to Jay, so is that something we're gonna do this evening, or?
It's up to the board.
The applicant did volunteer a healthy number of conditions, I think, right?
Yes, thank you for that. Just call them up. Give me 1 second, please. Okay, hold on. I know I have them. Talk amongst yourselves. Give me a minute. I just have to find them.
So you're looking for like a set of conditions that's already been written?
Pull it from that email you sent.
Yeah,
to me.
the applicant's attorney sent over a letter with some suggested conditions.
just seems that, the planning board, in every town, planning board or the ZBA always become the mediators in the funnel for, this private way issue that's in the state. And sometimes it.
Title in this state, title is old in this state, and there's just always issues. It's-
Some of the policies seem to
So-
have never been clarified.
Do you mind if I ask you
Mr.
a
Kemp?
question? Are there any, like, towns that have gone to their private roads and taken all the deeds and looked at them all and collated them to what street they're on and said, all right, well, this is the way it is because we now have the empirical data to support that, we own to the edge of the road, whatever it may be. And it just seems like, for us, it would kind of make sense because we've got, I can just list like 5 or 6 roads right off the top of my head that have title issues or supposed title issues.
I don't, I'm not sure if I've been part of or seen, maybe they've done it, where a town has said, we're gonna, from A to Z, do a thorough inventory of our private ways, including examining the layouts, through survey data, GIS data, and otherwise. It'd be a significant undertaking in any community.
Mhm.
I've certainly seen it on a case-by-case basis where towns will take a deep dive into a particular area or right of way.
Or a
Certainly it's something
particular
that's out there, of all the things the town has to spend money on and without the money to spend on it, that's one.
Mhm.
And I suppose it'd be a good undertaking, it'd be good to understand, especially if you have 200-year-old private ways, exactly what's going on with them.
Mhm.
Guarantee it's not what it looks like on the ground.
Yeah, and unfortunately, in conversation with the former highway director for Hanson, a conversation, the question was very simple. If the town was to accept all private ways as public, would the chapter money that comes in for public ways, would it equate balancing out what that expense would be?
Oh, God, no.
And he said absolutely not.
It's a fraction.
Wouldn't even be a tenth of
Yeah.
what his estimated cost would be just off the top of his head.
Yeah, that's
Knowing
not,
how many private ways,
Yeah.
If it worked out to be a balance, or even, just a draw,
no, not even close, never.
Right.
This was a letter sent in by the applicant's attorney. I'll just read it in part of the record. Dated August 22nd from Walter Sullivan from Sullivan and Comerford, PC. Dear Mr. DeFries, in anticipation of the planning board's vote and decision on the above referenced matter, we are providing you with suggested conditions for the board's consideration. When you have an opportunity, could you confirm the date of the next planning board hearing? Thank you for your anticipated courtesy and cooperation. So he had provided on the second page here some proposed conditions that the applicant is willing to agree to. So I'll just read that so as part of the record. The applicant, Alan J. Diaz, trustee of J&G Trust, in accordance with the plan prepared by Webby Engineering Associates, Inc., Civil Engineers and Land Surveyors, 180 County Road, Plumpton, Mass. 02367, dated August 11, 2023, hereinafter quoted, quote, plan, end quote, and hereby proposes the following scope of work on Snow Street, Hanson, Mass. 02341, in accordance with the Town of Hanson bylaw section 12. 2 improvements to private ways. First would be limit of work to be 200 feet plus or minus 6 to 8 feet wide from Montponset Street in a southerly direction within the limits of Snow Street as indicated in the plan. 2. Any and all brush and vegetation to be removed. 3. Any and all stumps connected to the brush to be removed. 4. Any and all trees that would impede the line of sight to be removed. 5. Any and all stumps attached to the trees to be removed. 6. Any and all stumps cut from the previous excavation to be removed as required that are within the road layout. 7. The gravel berm created by the grader to be removed. 8. At the contractor's discretion, the roadway to be graded to the direction of the drainage areas. 8. The existing drainage to be inspected and cleaned as required. 9. Any tree branches within the limits of Snow Street that impede the excavation process to be trimmed and removed. 10. Engineering controls to be added to ensure that the work to be completed will be in compliance with layout as depicted in Monpont Lake and Land Company, Hanson and Halifax, Plymouth County Mass Plan C number 39 is recorded in Plan Book 1, page 39. Plan prepared by A.D. French, Civil Engineers, Brookline, Mass. Filed August 18, 1888. What was I, 10? At the conclusion of the work, the applicant's engineer shall provide a letter of substantial compliance and an as-built plan. And lastly, the applicant shall hold the town of Hanson and Hanson Planning Board harmless for the work that is completed as proposed.
So two things, two questions that come to mind to me right away is the item discussing something filed August 18th, 1888, and further, I wish these were numbered, but there's another one up here. Any and all stumps cut from previous excavation removed is required as within the roadway layout. So those are the two things that concerns in the first place is, you know, what's the validity of those claims of the engineering controls from 1888, and where is the roadway layout and who owns what? So both of those conditions are, I'm confused as to how to go forward with that.
Instead of roadway layout, you could just put limit of traveled way, which would be in essence the dirt road.
It seems as ambivalent as the rest of this whole thing and how it ended up where it is.
Okay, Plan Book 1, page 39. If you look at that, it doesn't really have a lot of engineering recommendations. 1888.
Well, there are plans on file that show this road having controlled survey monuments along the side.
On the sides, right?
Yeah, there's concrete bounds, not, and I believe they're at lot corners, but so they do demarcate the edge of the layout based on survey information.
So who's the, my other question is, who's the engineer that's going to design? Does that person exist?
Who's going to design or review? You mean review or
No, it's like all these things, we get the roadway and we get the swale and all this stuff like, I guess my question is, whose idea was this? That, you know, is this sufficient for what needs to be done? How do we know that? And the other thing is, we don't have any evidence to support the record plan, book 1, page 30, like where is that? We should be able to see that. And we should also be able to see if there's been anything done post that date. You know, which obviously is all kinds of houses on the road, so there's, you know, current plans, things like that. So why wouldn't we have that information? So that would be my first question. Like, you know, I think this is a good start, but
So you can pull up that Plan Book 1, page 39, right?
I think it's kind of a moot point because of all that's come after it. So I don't know. For me, it's just a question.
Well, how about using this as a, let's say, a foundation?
Yeah.
And then coming up with conditions
Okay.
based on this
Mm-hmm.
that the board can review, we can pass along to town council, and then you can.
Okay. That sounds like a plan.
Yeah, I mean, there's the other plan, there's this plan, and then the original plan they submitted that shows a gravel road. I believe that's their preferred form here, they're not proposing a paved road.
The original had a drainage ditch.
It did, and
And grading.
the cross-section showed 12-inch regraded gravel road.
Yes.
Assuming that's the case, then I think you're definitely gonna wanna have a plan for the annual maintenance that anyone would do to a gravel road. You're probably gonna want some kind of bonding for the original construction, and then some kind of contingency in there, whether it's in that same instrument that makes sure that there's money for future maintenance of that way. If the property owners, this wouldn't be as big a deal if we had a roadway association of all the property owners, because we would bake that into there.
Right.
Here, we're gonna need, if you just, by year 2, it could be a problem, and you're gonna need something that's enforceable on a condition that says, shall annually regrade. But if someone refuses to, what's the remedy? Because they're cash poor for whatever reason, development down the road didn't go well or whatever, you're gonna wanna make sure that some kind of instrument is going to be paying for that.
As well as notifying the select board and highway
Right.
when you're on your annual regrading mission.
So one of the reasons I bring that up is because the last swale that was done by whomever, whenever, I don't remember all the details of that, but the originally designed swale that was in that area was never maintained.
Correct.
So the real problem with the whole thing is, people can put in these things all they want, but at the end of the day, if it's not maintained, it's a waste of our time and energy to even bother with it.
Yeah.
So,
And the other thing, if I might add, Mr.
Yeah,
Chair, it was added, and according to the abutters, it was the town that in essence buried it.
You buried it.
oh yeah, I mean,
Failed.
that's, that's another one of those contentions that, show me the pictures. I'm sure it happened, but I don't want to, I'm trying to be as clear as I possibly can about what I'm supposed to be doing and try to ignore all the minutia that's all around it, because it's just confuses me even more. So I just want to get to the meat of this thing, so that I know what am I saying? And I'd like to know, like that swale, and I can, our legal counsel's telling us that it sounds like that if we condition a swale, we need to make sure that we have the means to make sure that it's taken care of, right? So that's a positive thing. So that is, all right, that's,
My concern is, you can enforce, so you have a say, shall do annual maintenance.
Mhm.
But what are you enforcing? So it's not like where you can do a cease and desist and block off the road. So you have to build in a mechanism that is self-actuating so that there's access to some means of compelling performance. If someone is supposed to do something because they're doing a little commercial building, shut it down. You're gonna shut down a roadway that's providing access to all these roads, so you're gonna have to backfill this with the kind of conditions you need. If this was a paved roadway, maybe it wouldn't be as big a deal. If the drainage would, this thing, and I'm not gonna, Tony knows more about this stuff than I do, someone's gonna have to clean out that swale on an annual basis or however frequently.
Right, I think that what becomes almost unenforceable here is the fact that the applicant sells the property. The next person is going to go down the street and maintain that swale. No, that's not going to happen until it becomes, if it ever was to become a public way, that'd be different. But it's a burden, I think, on any homeowner. If it was in front of their property or on their property, like we've had with the other projects, it's one thing, because then they're going to think they can.
It's theirs.
It's theirs.
It's theirs.
But this is just something that in essence is, we'll say down the street. And so I'm not sure that's to burden that person with maintaining it. And not to mention, we know that there's an abutter that says, hey, I don't want you even coming close to me. So that would have its own issues. I mean, under the decision, if I may, Mr. Chair, under the decision, it says the following the public hearing, the planning board will determine that either A, the plan may be approved because the proposed improvements will be sufficient to allow the planning board to issue a positive determination upon completion of the improvements. The plan may be approved because the proposed improvements with modifications required by the planning board will be sufficient to allow the planning board to issue a positive determination upon completion of the improvements, or the plan must be denied because the proposed improvements will be insufficient to allow the planning board to issue a positive determination upon completion of the improvements.
Positive
Again.
determination, referencing a reapplication of the adequate access application.
Right, so, again, for me, and again, I'm not a voting member, but as a planner looking at it in what's in front of me, as Mr. Kemet says, empirical data. You've asked for an improvements to private way. That application has been filed. A plan has been submitted with improvements to said private way. Again, the applicant's property is upstream. at the top of the hill. His property will create as a one buildable lot that conforms to zoning, and his property slopes away from the road. So, I think he's met the criteria. That's just me. So,
Well-
but I mean, I understand wanting to put conditions that say that this plan that's before you actually gets, let's say, constructed, and have an as-built once it's done, as a condition, so that you know that the improvements that were made
Right, yeah. Yeah, no,
have been made, so then that way it'll allow you to issue a positive
Yeah, there's
determination.
a clear demarcation point from this point on.
Can I just quickly
Mr.
add to that? So I hear what Tony's saying, but for me, the question is, I didn't propose the swale. I didn't propose any of these improvements. And I'm just going based on what being asked to look at, which it shows on the plan, there's a swale. I don't care where it came from. I just want it to be created by someone who knows what they're talking about, like an engineer or whatever it is. So whether it's there or not is of inconsequence to me, technically, right? You know, if you're looking at this thing holistically, it's like, so you got this big swale there, and I have to decide whether it's sufficient or not. And like Joni said, I don't have the empirical data to support whether that is, going to work or do what it's supposed to do or when. But again, it's not my problem that somebody proposed it, whether it's sufficient or not, or whether they can do it or not. We're here to look at what's been presented to us and determine whether it satisfies our regulations. And, so all this other stuff that we're adding in there, it's just pollution in my mind, because to me, it just seems pretty simple. This is what was proposed, this is what we're gonna vote on, right? Who lives where or what do their houses off the road or any of that stuff, it seems almost inconsequential to this decision.
And the plan has confirmed that he hasn't heard anything from the
Yeah.
public hearing, anything additional from the public hearing, so.
I think, and town council could tell me whether I'm wrong. I agree. It's all that other stuff is irrelevant. What's in front of you? A plan to improve a private way. There it is. Condition that what is being proposed is what is done, and then that way the board can make a positive determination. How? By having an as-built showing that, yep, what you proposed is what was done, done deal. What goes on after that is not up to the planning board.
Move to this.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And the butter, just as the applicant has a right, if they feel aggrieved by the decision, if I'm correct, to seek a court appeal, an appeal to the courts.
Yeah, but the missing piece of this, though, is the swale as presented something that we should be approving?
A pre-existing swale?
Well, no, whatever is proposed. Like I said,
You could have a
going back in
condition
history.
that compels it
you know.
to go through further engineering review,
Right,
your own peer reviewer.
okay.
I mean, this was the revised plan that was submitted.
Right.
Okay, so this was the revised plan that was submitted.
I mean, there's no engineering details on that plan. And there's
No.
just the bare minimum on the other plan.
Right.
So
You know,
if you wanted it before they could commence with the construction of it, have them present a completely engineered plan for consideration for compliance with stormwater management or whatever,
Mhm.
to a peer review engineer at their expense, would seem reasonable. If you wanted them to do things like, if you don't like the pavement depth or the width or the material, you can condition it to something different. I mean, it's your call.
We'd have to get some quotes if we were gonna do that, right? We'd have to get some quotes between now.
No, I mean, it depends. So you close the hearing, right? So
Yes.
as a condition of approval,
Right.
they would have to come to you. They would then have to deposit money for your peer review engineer at that time. The board can consider those quotes at that time. Not now. And I'm not saying that you should. It seems to me in that something here has not been really robustly engineered yet, that you may want to. But I'm also, like Tony, I'm not a member of the board.
Neutral.
And I think the more you get into it, this is as simple as it gets for an area that is very difficult, to say the least. I would suggest that maybe we look at the conditions that were proposed and again, go from there and have that as a foundation.
Yeah, I think that the board has a general consensus that having a difficult situation, we don't want to be back here again 2 years from now, or 8 years from now, or 10 years from now. As council said back 10 years ago, weighed opinion on the same area. It just seems like it just never ends. And it's almost, and I myself personally, I won't speak for the board, but I myself personally, I don't want it to continue because for any of these issues that we have in town, because it just never seems to go away.
Yeah, but really, realistically, if we make a decision and make a determination, yes or no, that puts, that's it for us. We're out of, you know, I mean, there's really nothing more.
I don't mean with
to say.
this particular, I mean with these issues, with these, the private ways issues, it just seems like it's always gonna be there. It's like a barnacle.
So, I don't know how much more you want to discuss this, but I'd like to make a motion that we continue this to our next meeting, because I would like to think about some of the stuff that I've heard, and I'd like to digest it a little bit and make my mind up. And if you guys are okay with that.
Mr. Kimmett's got a motion on the floor to continue this discussion to the next tentative date of September 11th.
Yes.
Second. Motion's been made and properly seconded by Mr. Cohen. Any discussion in regards to that motion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. 3-0-2, Tony. All right, we will continue that. Council, thank you very much for your time. Appreciate all your input.
Yeah, happy to keep helping on this one, right, just keep us posted.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Of course.
Thanks for coming in on your vacation.
It's only pseudo vacation, I never give myself
A
enough.
staycation.
Yeah, I give that much.
If you have to see Mr. Ellis out in the hall, you mind asking him to come
I
back in?
will tell him to come in.
Thank you very much.
I locked my truck.
Did all those people sign in? Did it? Do you think they signed in?
Everybody except for the last person.
It's the right idea, drinking and dying.
Sorry to
No.
sip.
There's part of me that
With my
doesn't say yes.
germs.
I left my water on in my truck. Yeah. So
Want a quick recess to go out and grab it?
what else do we have left?
Not too much.
I can survive.
Tony's update, minutes, invoices.
So do we need a motion, or we'll get away from Dawn, right? I don't know. Fell asleep out on the bench.
Oh, he said.
I was kind of hoping that he wouldn't leave, and instead he would just recuse himself from any motions, because a lot of the history, and Mr. Ellis has been here through a lot of that. So some of those questions were private ways, especially being a part of the board, that 4 members quit because of an issue with a private way.
That's, again, no, but that's not really empirical data, because it's just someone's opinion.
Yeah,
I gotta be honest, I don't wanna hear opinions, I just want to see the facts on paper that say, you can do this or you can't.
I wanted to bake in, and Tony did it for me, bake in a little bit of discussion in regards to the private ways itself, because it is an issue.
Well, yeah, no, it is, no, I get that. And any opportunity to bring it up is a good one, I get that. I gotta be, my head is so full of stuff with this one. My head hurts. You do a big job in the minutes, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, no, I like the way they're done.
Thank you. So these are amended from this afternoon, so the ones that you received the other day
I see.
were incomplete.
Are those laid out?
The one that,
Change.
so you don't even have them in there. Those are your most recent. So you were,
So you may,
See, I always read the ones that you send via email.
yeah, so the
so
one
I-
via email,
Different than those?
this is
Right.
different. It's more detailed.
so I would, may recommend Mr. Chair, that you table these minutes and take these home and review them.
Are they significant
And then-
changes?
There's
There's a lot more
there's a lot more information.
Ah, okay, so.
I hadn't realized that Kim hadn't quite wrapped them up, so when I sent them out Friday.
Oh, okay.
So the highlights that are in there are not the only changes?
Correct, yeah,
I see the 14.
yeah, there's a lot of,
So do you mind resending these electronically?
yeah, well,
So,
I can
because,
do
you
that
know,
tomorrow.
then I can access them no matter where I am, you know, I don't have to have this meeting. Which I will,
We still have a majority
I'll
of the
make
board.
paper airplanes out of this.
Yeah, so we still have a majority of the board. The chair would entertain a motion to take the, I'm sorry, no, it's right on the next agenda. So, moving on, Mr. Ellis, it's 8:16, Mr. Ellis still hasn't returned to the room. We still have a majority of the board in session. The chair would entertain a motion to postpone the approval of the August 14th, 2023 public meeting minutes till the next tentative meeting of September 11th.
So moved.
Motion's been made.
Yeah.
Motion's been made and properly seconded by Mr. Kemen. Any discussion in regards to that motion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? 302. Tony, we'll put that on to September 11th. Next up, in administration, you have some invoices that you want to pay?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. These guys do pass it down, you know. They will.
Oh.
They're not
Yeah,
they're
you
not-
can
they're
hand
not
it to
afraid
me,
of
I'll
voice.
pass
Part of my job description, I thought.
Yeah, there you go.
All right, we have an invoice.
Come on in, my friend.
Still sitting up there.
We have an invoice for August 16th, planning board, $8,694.00, packet 22916 from for a dentist. This is for peer review.
Yes, for the Meadowbrook subdivision.
Any questions in regards to this invoice?
No.
I would like to comment. I think that Verdantis does a wonderful job. I absolutely think that they're very thorough. So
Yeah.
that's-
Does that get passed on to that?
Your checking. We have another invoice, $90, invoice packet 22968 for advertising. Any questions in regards to this invoice?
Yes,
2 public hearings.
for 2 public hearing advertisements for September 11th regarding the MBTA regulations.
This is coming out of the MBTA zoning.
Yes.
Are we gonna get an electronic copy of that?
Yes.
While you wrote, we postponed the minutes from August to September 11th. You're going to get a new updated version. For the record, Mr. Ellis has returned at 8:19, so that's, we postponed it, so you're going to get that in the email.
What was wrong with it?
Which, more details provided. Moving on with the last invoice, $26.39, office supplies. Any questions in regards to this invoice?
Yeah.
What's that?
Pay it.
Thank you.
That was
Moving
easy.
on,
You just
on
have to
our,
type it.
on our agenda is administration, town planner.
First thing is the MBTA regulations. One, there was a new update, or we'll call it a revision to the final regulations by the state that just came out, and those will be discussed on September 11th. So,
It's coming up on the 11th.
yeah, so what's going to come up on the 11th of September is a public hearing, and I'm going to invite basically all the different departments on the second floor and anyone else in town hall, fire, police. And what will be happening on that night will be we'll call it the unveiling of the district, the proposed district that meets the criteria for the MBTA regulations that I worked on with Old Colony Planning Council. I also last week before, had a meeting with Katie Lacey from the MHP, Mass Housing, and a Luke Mitchell from VHB. The state has given us another grant for just under $20,000, and I'll be working with VHB to promulgate regulations and in essence get us over the finish line. So what we'll be doing is working with him. We'll unveil the district. I'm hoping to have some preliminary draft zoning regs based on the state's template. Then we take that and we get it to the state for their review. They'll take a look at it and say yay or nay in conformance. If it conforms, then we can move that on to town meeting.
Okay.
So for May of 2024. That way, it's not a case of you go to town meeting and then you give it to the state and the state says, no, hang on a second, you didn't do this right or something's
Yeah,
wrong.
it's the other way around.
So that's the process. Next,
So we're just recommending at the town meeting, we're not actually voting yay or nay. It's just.
right, because that'll be zoning bylaws. So it'll be just like the zoning bylaw process. We'll have a public meet, we'll have a public hearing. We'll go through the whole process before town meeting of May 2024, because these regulations have to be in place by December 2024. The new regulations that they just added were basically allowing call it a mixed-use component in this MBTA zoning versus just housing.
Oh, can I just add a quick thing to that, if you don't mind? Is like, I noticed like at the last couple of town meetings, people seem to be confused, like, the planning board is proposing these things. So is there a way to put it in the description that we're just recommending it? We're not, proposing it or any of that stuff. I just want to make sure people are clear of where this is coming from, rather than, it's like we didn't create this. The state's telling us that we have to do this. I think it's important that people know that.
Right, it would come from the planning board, but the explanation would have a statement that this is being mandated by the state.
Okay.
And as part of that package, I would also add information that'll be revealed on the 11th, including the letter from the AG's office that says if you don't do this, this AG's office is going to go after towns that don't do it, in essence, fine them and criminally and all that stuff.
Like, those are important things for people.
Just about.
I think those are important things for people to know, when they're deciding whether they want to vote for or against it. So that's a lot of information for one little warrant article.
Yeah.
I think that there was an intent, the last time meeting for that.
Yes, I mean, so the first step is on September 11th, that is a public hearing.
Right.
And it's gone out on the Whitman Hanson Express. So the second notice is actually taking place this Thursday.
We have to have.
Right, and so, I'll also get in touch with our, we'll call it, social media person, and I'll put a news bulletin on our planning board webpage, to try and get as much of it out there as possible.
Right.
Is it possible to have, like, maybe the newspaper have a discussion with you and write an article?
I can reach out to the Whitman
so-
Hanson Express
I
on
think
that.
they might, they're always looking for something to write about, so it's not a bad thing to get some sense of, because I know what's gonna happen is people are gonna start talking on social media and making shit up, and, but at the end of it, we really just want them to, understand the reality of what's going on, So, anything we can do to make that happen would be wonderful.
I think
That's
that
one-
too, Kevin, though, I think at the last town meeting, I think that there was also a public attendee that had a clear agenda of trying to kind of kibosh in some discussions. The moderator did the best job possible to try to rein it in. So I think when we were in attendance, I was getting ready to get up and speak again to clarify, and you could tell that the moderator was ready to move on from what the issue was.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things that VHB is gonna help is with some visuals and so forth on this. So that'll be part of it.
Perfect.
So they'll be helping out. 1489 Main Street, I received a call from the highway superintendent. He and someone else went out to the site, pulled up manhole covers and looked inside and did not see any type of illegal connection into that drainage system. One thing the board may have already seen, let me see if I could just pull it up. Give me one second.
Thank you to Highway for going out and and doing that inspection to kind of quell the fires.
Let's see if I can. Here we go.
I just had a fly go by my head.
So this is a picture maybe you've seen, maybe you haven't. So the connection between what was existing and what's proposed and what you see as the flared end is right there.
Mhm.
That's where, so these came off the street view. So that's where the connection was made. So originally that pipe ended here, and then they put this, we'll call it a distribution box, if you will, and picked up with an outlet and then continued it out to approximately in this general area.
See just above the bucket, to the right of the second construction vehicle with the front motor, just above the bucket, right there.
Yeah.
To the right. That was the area of concern that a resident had.
Can I just add this just real quick? It seems to me, again, that everybody's focusing on, what it is, what's connected to it, but everyone is ignoring the fact that it's where it is in the first place.
Right.
And how it got where it is,
Right.
which is way more important than the fact that it's there. Right? It looks horrible from a design perspective. I think whoever did it, that's on them.
Well, originally it was supposed to be about 15 feet to the right, but somebody decided that they wanted to
Again,
put a driveway in.
It doesn't matter. And the issue with this, right? And I think that the Conservation Commission would be able to give us, again, some empirical data to support the idea that they're literally using the roadway as a stormwater management structure within 200 feet of a river. So whoever approved this and said this is a good idea, someone should have a talk with them because they're A, not authorized to do that, and B, it doesn't make any sense because it doesn't function the way a normal stormwater management system should on a road like Route 27. So I would like to find out from the state whether they're okay with the way that this is built.
Based
Just throwing that out there.
based on the information in the files that I've read
Mhm.
for this, it was, I believe, the previous highway superintendent that gave the okay on this, and it was reviewed by a peer reviewer for the project, and so basically we've had eyes on it. So did somebody drop the ball? Is it not where it should be? Yes, there's a driveway there that shouldn't be there, but the sad part is the town did look at it and comment on it.
You're saying a previous town employee gave the okay for the driveway?
The drainage, my understanding is that a previous highway superintendent allowed this connection.
Well, see, that's my point though, is it was engineered to be in one spot.
Right.
It's not in that spot, and the reason it's not in that spot is an unqualified person said, yeah, go ahead, you can move it if you want to. So, that, for me, the rest of it, I really don't care about. What I just said to you is what really matters is because we've got people saying, sure, you can do that if you want to. And that all affects I'm willing to bet that if you got a hold of the stormwater management people at the state, and the state themselves and the DEP, and they're standing there, and the minute they talk about it, they look down, they see the river 200 feet away, they're gonna go, what is this?
Would they consider it an illicit discharge?
Yes. And that's been my point all along, which everyone just seems to be focusing on, whether it's, been approved to be there or not. It's like doesn't even matter because it's wrong. And, somebody needs to say it and fix it. That's all I'm saying.
Where was the original outflow from that? Because those two catch basins that run across Main Street,
The original outflow
they
was
had a
right,
discharge someplace.
right here.
That was the original discharge?
Yes. Based on the information I've read, it basically came out of a hole in the
All right, but let's
ground.
do a D-box, and then what, just into the ground again?
The pipe was buried, I read in some piece of correspondence that said that basically it bubbled up, the water bubbled out of the ground.
Oh.
And I think actually that was in an email, because I
Yeah, it's part of an email you
Yeah.
read.
Water main.
yeah, there was an email, and I think I might have read that
That
to
is
the,
in my notes, from
Yeah.
my additional notes.
that from,
I would like to suggest that we go down the road, right, to the project that's right next to this, on the other side of it, right, and look at the plans for that and where that ties into this, because it would have to, because, you know, yeah, some of it's in the roadway layout, but it's also, you know, that person on the other side must have had some knowledge of this piping because they had to do their project and get it approved.
Which project, John? Progress Way? Or-
No, the one
I'm sorry,
behind it.
Brookside? Or-
That rental house that's next to it, I can't think of the guy's name, but he was in here because of,
Bearcat?
Bearcat, or, you know, because,
How do you say it? Bearcat? Is it Baraka?
Barack Obama.
Yeah.
so I guess what I'm,
Talking about something else.
so Joe, I guess what I'm saying is there's been a lot of development done in the area, so there has to be something. But anyway, that's, I'm
It's
just,
all going shoots on the other side.
Yeah, just don't shoot on this side.
I didn't
So-
think they had any drainage on it, I thought it just went down the swale on the side of the road. There is no catch basins down there, is it?
no.
Standard catch basin.
Just double
no,
shoot.
that outfall comes from a set of catch basins.
And
And that bubble up over the ground and then just run down the gutter line,
now they put a pipe in.
all the way down?
They put a pipe into what, that, to
Oh,
that
here,
outflow.
yeah, where they were working.
Yeah.
It's just to move it along where they
That
were.
was it, it's just to move it along.
Yeah, and it was given the
All
okay.
that stuff was down there, because we had a problem at the entryway to Donald Shoots,
Right,
right there.
And now-
Half the water comes in, it goes into their own retention area.
and now that's contributing to that.
Right.
So it's either gonna be DEP that's gonna have it, or, yeah, DEP is gonna have an issue with it, or it's gonna be
Dawn
Donald
was
Shute
saying,
that has an issue with it.
there's a stormwater management structure at the edge of Brookside Road.
Yeah, it
Right,
doubles,
and,
double catch basin.
All of that stuff that's coming out of that pipe from that site is either going past it into the river, or it's going into the stormwater management system at that site, which was not designed for it.
Right.
And goes out and dumps out into back in the wetlands that are behind there.
Right.
So even though it's not within conservation jurisdiction, this is definitely without a doubt a conservation.
What I witnessed as a heavy flow coming out of that during one of the rain events we had a couple of weeks ago.
Problem's gonna come in, and whoever approved it's gonna have to change it,
Wow.
Exactly.
I think he's did.
you know, because if they gave the approval on it, if the town highway department gave the approval on it, they're gonna have to fix it.
Yeah, but that's, you know, now you're spending town funds because some clown who isn't even authorized, because, you know, most towns, and I looked this up because of this, right, is almost every town has an in-house engineer. So when they do road work and culverts and stormwater management structures, it's got a stamp on it because it's been done by a professional who knows what he's talking about.
Except for this,
And,
this
you know,
got approved by somebody that
Right,
was
so,
unqualified to
and
say
that's my
that.
point.
Yes.
So the highway surveyor does not have any of the qualifications with the licensure to make an approval like that in the roadway layout. So whatever that is, whatever the outcome of this is the point is to make sure that this doesn't happen again. And I can give you 3 instances of it right nearby. And one of them is the dance studio over there. Take a look at that stormwater management structure at the edge of the road and where that ultimately ends up, right? So, you know, my point is we have stormwater management regulations that it's supposed to come to us before it goes anywhere, which it doesn't. So we could have prevented this right out of the gate by saying, where's your engineer? You know, we're going to support this. That
Well,
this
there's
is
another one
okay.
upstream from that too.
I know there is.
That thing is a cluster.
Yep, there's one at the industrial park, right, for the marijuana place. There's a culvert facing right out at the road. You know, and it's like, who's approving this stuff? I mean, so I'm just saying. You know,
Let's put it this way: it's interesting reading in the files.
Oh, it's bad
No, I'm
because
sure
now
it
it's,
is.
And I would sandbag the town with the resolution. That's the major problem is.
And as far as where it goes, it's supposed to not get into
Anybody-
Brookside,
Yeah,
Right.
right.
because
Yep.
part of the conditions for Brookside was to create an apron at that entrance
Yes,
to prevent any runoff from Main Street entering into Brookside.
Mhm.
Now, if you look at Street View, you'd say that, yep, it looks like it was done. Now, with the repaving, did they put it back? I haven't had opportunity
yeah. it
to take a
hasn't been
look.
yet. Not the extent that it was. So during a heavy rain event, the outflow from this went in the tree belt along the road, basically turned that into like a sluice box. And it took all kinds of sand and silt and carried it to the double basin at the corner of Brookside. So that dumped everything down to the double basin. As the rain event subsided and it became a lighter flow, it went from here out onto the edge of the road, onto the Cape Cod berm, hit, now it's been paved again, but originally it hit the berm that was put in secondary to stop that from going across the street, and it went down to Stump Brook.
Right.
So when it did that, it carried all of the sand and silt along 27 Main Street down to Stump Brook, went off to the side and right down to Stump Brook. You can see the sand coming out.
And it's not a surprise that you're seeing more sand because of the fact that obviously that's just been repaved.
Right.
If there's been some berms added that weren't there before, now they're funneling the more runoff towards these catch basins. And that was one of the things that the state, one of the reasons why the state has not bermed this entire road in their new pavement is because the state had told the highway superintendent, you don't have sufficient drainage along Main Street. And so what that means, what they're trying to say is, for the amount of runoff you're going to generate by putting in these Cape Cod berms, the drainage that you do have is insufficient to handle that stormwater runoff. And it'll either blow by it or just inundate it.
So instead of having Cape Cod berms with cuts going out, they just leave the whole side open.
Right, right. So it just runs off into the
Yeah, so the
sides.
Instead of having a concentration in one area.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
So,
So the thing with this though, is like, the existing culverts upstream of this, right? As we all know from subdivision stuff, is calculated, designed, it's got certain flows, and all these people are putting in pipes and changing everything. It's like, it just
Change
takes
the whole road now.
away whatever calculations were done to those culverts upstream, again, so I'm just throwing that out
We
there.
definitely should get some input from Highway about what they want to do as a resolution, if they haven't already offered to.
they do have a plan.
Okay, great.
Master Plan Steering Committee, I sent a letter to the Select Board, and on their agenda for tomorrow evening, they're gonna put out the request for volunteers.
Great.
Earth removal application process, I asked Kim to do some research to some different towns. What I've seen so far is strictly earth removal, not stockpiling.
Okay.
But these various towns do have applications which I do not see Hanson having. In other words, I don't see Hanson has an application or a fee structure, but these other towns do. So I'm going to read through all the towns and kind of pick which one I think might be a good foundation to have for Hanson, and I'll bring that forward at some point to the board.
So, can I ask you a quick question though? Does that mean like if someone wanted to get, I know we talked about cubic yards, because, sometimes someone might have a pile of dirt delivered for landscaping purposes, outside their driveway, which would be a big pile of dirt, which, I'll be honest with you, I don't wanna be like going to hearings endlessly over piles of dirt.
Yeah, these applications have limits.
Okay.
So it's like, if it's below this, it's not even an earth removal permit.
Okay.
And the numbers were pretty high. So, outstanding subdivision projects. So I sent off letters last week to Mr. Ritter for Sydney Lane, one for Christopher Lane. I sent a letter to Curley and Hanson regarding Azalea and Hemlock. I sent a letter to Ross Engineering regarding Bonnie Hill, and they responded and basically said, we don't think that the plan was ever submitted for roadway acceptance, which is the cul-de-sac. And last one was for Brookside, for Progress and Brookside Drive. So all those letters have been sent out to these developers, basically in asking them what their intentions are, and the ones that had the outstanding bond monies, I let them know there's this much outstanding bond money. Basically, we'd like you to contact the planning board and try and, they'd like your cooperation in trying to basically put these things to bed.
Yeah, get it.
So, we sent them all out certified mail, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, we sent them all out certified mail. If we don't hear from them, then we'll send them out again.
So
But-
can we design a bylaw? I think, I might have asked this before, and if I did, I apologize. But I feel like if we had something in our zoning bylaw, you know, laying out like, okay, if you put in a subdivision, right, and it's approved, the roadway has to be approved within a certain amount of time. You know, 'cause
That's
like
part of
this
the
turning over the HOA stuff.
That's
You
part
know.
of the subdivision bylaw.
Yeah.
I mean, the subdivision control law.
Yeah.
When you make it, when you approve it, and let's say it's a covenant, right? That you put a time limit. A lot of towns, it's 2 years. They'll do a 2 year it's 2 years from the date of approval, not date of endorsement.
So the last subdivision approval by the Town of Hanson Planning Board, there was a request for waiver from the 2 year to 4 year, and that was put in. You know, that's
So you're saying
subdivision
that
never
there's
went
always
in.
been a law, but these have just fallen through the cracks, is what you're telling me.
Yes, a lot of what I've seen in the private sector, when I did roads, the planning board would say you had 2 years or it would automatically rescind.
But like this Meadowbrook one, I haven't seen anything that speaks to, like he said that, oh, once we turn it over to HOA, they're talking about taking a bond to hold, to make sure that they take care of it until it's either turned over to and that's what I don't like about it, is either it's turned over to a HOA or it's accepted by the town.
Yeah,
Or not. He did
Or
use,
not.
he did use a, if it's accepted by the town.
Right.
So,
So I guess for me, you know, the only way to solve this problem going forward, so the next iteration doesn't have to deal with this, all these ones that have been incomplete because the developers walked away. I'm saying I think we need to change the bylaw to make it impossible for them to walk away. You know, and I don't know if that's legal.
Well, the intent is to do a higher bond.
Which- yeah, which-
Yeah,
even the higher bond in the subdivision control law, the penal bond has to be, accurate, has to be accurate. So in other words, so it's a case of, this is how much it's gonna cost plus inflation.
Yeah.
That's what that's what the subdivision controller holds you to. So it's not like you can say, we wanna ask for $10 million.
Yeah.
You can't. The subdivision control law prevents you from doing that.
Yeah, stops, like stop signs.
Yeah, so you have the amount has to be, well, I'll say accurate.
you know, given that wording, right, there's no ability to say, all right, well, in the last 3 years, the price of doing what you proposed far exceeds the amount of money that's in the account because of the length of time that it took.
Well, you add in inflation. You can't add inflation in. That's what it allows you to do.
We also control the lot release too.
You know, like, we've done that in the past, right, you know, I get
And there's also a caveat under 81U, if you read it, that talks about the planning board could request that one of the lots be a park that you can't build on for 3 years. So if you look up Mass General Law, I'll send it to you, Mass General Law, Chapter 41, Section 81U, which talks about performance, securing bonds and so forth, at the very end, it's one of these little things that no one really pays attention to.
Mhm.
But you could ask which one of those lots, if you felt the case was right, to be a park for 3 years where they can't build on it.
So when that comes to fruition for us to talk about that,
Okay.
that'll be in there. Unfortunately, every single project, the most tenured member that we have, Mr. Ellis on the planning board, every single project that Tony just mentioned, Mr. Ellis inherited. So all of that's been kicked down the road for
Right, and
multiple
that's,
years.
and
It's a
that's,
shame.
that's really what I'm saying, when I listen to that, I think, is there something we can do to stop that from happening again?
Right.
By, you know, because I clearly heard that guy, and he has, that company has absolutely no intentions of getting that road approved, because they're gonna leave it to the HOA who may decide not to, right? And, you know, is that their privilege? Maybe, I don't know. My point is, like,
5 years from now, they might do citizens petition to
we're
have.
gonna be, but we're gonna be right back where we
Right,
started,
right,
and where Mr. Ellis has been listening to this as well.
Yep.
So, I'm just looking for proposals. Is there a way to close that gap that's legal, you know? Because I think, you know, I know, I get that we get a bond and all that stuff, but we've released all kinds of bonds, like on Ritter, up the road up there, and I sat in on those meetings, and we gave him his money back as the law required.
Yep.
Right, and at the end of the day, he still walked away because, you know, there wasn't enough money on the table for him to bother with it. So, and the only way to fix that, you know, at least in the subdivision is, you know, no, you can't create a private road in the town of Hanson by subdivision. Do you know what I mean? I don't know if that's legal. I've looked it up, but I can't really find it.
I think it'd be up to the town meeting, it'd be up to the citizens. I think that would be something you'd have to propose.
Yeah, all right.
Just one thing,
Mr. Ellis?
on Barney Hill Lane, the cul-de-sac on the bottom is a double catch basin. It needs a lot of work.
I've seen that in all, because I had to research every single one of these projects to try and get up to speed as to what was done and what the deficiencies were, and just even who was the developer, and try and get an address. There's one, a Doolittle on one of the projects. The company doesn't exist anymore, so we have bond money.
But the problem with the bond money on Barney Hill Lane is like 15,000, I think it is.
So,
But it's tough for us to take that money, we can't pay it off because we gotta pay the prevailing wage. So that's where it gets kinda, we tried to a few years ago to get the owner to get somebody in there to fix it. No, they just walk away.
So Tony, all that stuff you just mentioned at the bottom of Bonnie Hill Extension, I remember those in conservation meetings when I first began. A lot of what they were talking about didn't make sense at the time, but in retrospect, I think there's like orders of conditions of maintaining that culvert, double culvert that he's talking about on the end. You know, there's orders of conditions for that. So it would say, obviously, if you're going to give orders of condition, you're going to give them to somebody, right? So whoever that was, those would be there.
Highway's been there twice to do emergency repairs.
Yeah, so I've been trying to locate, you know, I've located some and have been able to send out letters. But there's one where the company is no longer exists. And I found, because some of the files are a little bit chaotic. And,
Just a little bit?
and I found information that I'm not sure who wrote this correspondence, but basically saying, yeah, the company doesn't exist anymore, and the people are like gone. So here's this money that we have, and even if we wanted to get them in here, they're gone.
Yeah.
So we have to find a way, basically, like, okay, we have to get that money, but the problem becomes with the money, once you get it, can wind up going into the general
It always
fund,
goes to the general fund.
unless you have, as a town, accepted, I think it's a section of 81U that you accept, I believe it's at town meeting, which would then allow you to actually use the money for the road versus it going into general fund. Now, there seems to be some correspondence of that was attempted, I think, maybe at one of the town meetings,
Yes.
and I don't know what the result was, because I'm still trying to chase it down.
The result was the treasurer saying that it was mandated to go into the general fund. And that money went into the general fund, and it never went anywhere else after that.
Well,
That's when we got creative, and said, was there a possibility that could be given back to an HOA? So that's where we come up Stonebridge. Stonebridge, we gave the money back, we had some of it for the as-bills, but then the leftover we gave to the HOA. The problem with some of these other developments is there is no HOA.
Yeah, but you know, if you look at it from the perspective of, if it's, you know, if somebody gives a bond, right, and they go away, and the town puts the money in the general fund, right, that doesn't make the obligation go away. Like,
No,
you
the
know,
obligation's still there.
So, I mean, what do you call it, Stonebridge, that's a perfect example, right? We were given money, we don't have that money, it's not in the bank account, where it says exactly what it's for, it went into the general fund. So that obligation exists. So why can't the town just vote to?
So the difference was with Stonebridge, it was filed with the treasurer that there was an intent for something to do with the money, as opposed to the last, what Tony's referring to.
Right.
It went to town meeting, there was never put in additional language about what the intent was. It was just all about, can the
Right.
town take the money?
But what
And
I'm
they said,
saying,
yes, we did. And
So you're saying the same, we're
Okay.
saying the same
Same
thing
thing,
because
yeah.
the money's gone into the general fund.
Yep.
But there's, not earmarks, but there's obligations for that. So you can stick it in the general fund all you want, you can spend it too.
Right.
But when the time comes to meet that obligation, you have no choice but to. So again, so you gotta look at, what kind of liability are you creating by, allowing that practice to continue?
Right.
It's just, I'm just throwing that up there.
So,
There's a couple of things. One is that it has to go back. You cannot take it. It has to go back to the original developer, whoever it was.
Right.
And,
or they sign off on it, say,
right, they don't. Well, you just can't. Now, we got a case where on Elm Street, I think it's about 100 grand in there, where a guy came in, I think it was down across from the subdivision that's there now, on the left.
need a drive?
Yeah, Nina Drive. And, geez, you know better than I do in this neighborhood. What happened was, the guy came in, wanted to make a subdivision out of it. He went to the town, went to the planning board, he's got all kinds of plans laid out for it, so they made him put up the money. He put up 100 grand, and they went to approve it, and the homeowner came in and says, what's going on my property? They never had permission to do that. So the guys walked away from it, and there sits the money. They never went back to get it. And it's just sitting there. We tried to get our state representative to make some sort of law that says if it's sitting there for a long time, a certain amount, that it can go back to the town. And that's the only thing we can do to do it.
Yeah, but that's what I was saying earlier though, Don, is like, it already went into the general fund. We've actually already spent it, right? It's just that we're obliged to pay it back if we have to. But if we never do, then we still got the money. And, they could actually come back and say, you got $100,000 for 15 years, that's
Yeah.
with interest,
Yeah.
So, I don't know, it's definitely an interesting subject, but not for tonight.
I think what they should do with the money would be to do sidewalks.
That'd be great.
I think there's a law against that though. Because, like saying, you can do this, but in order to do it, you have to do this.
No, I mean the
It's
money
clear
goes
about,
left over.
No, if we take the money in the general fund and make a motion during town hall to earmark it for sidewalk.
yeah, good luck with that one. I like to see that.
We try to do that.
All right. Sorry, you got a little.
So with that, that's where we're at. And
Any questions from the town planner?
I think that's it. that I
Entertain a
have.
motion for our next meeting to be Monday, September 11th, 2023 at 6:30. Motion's been made by Mr. Ellis, second by Mr. Cohen. Any discussion in regards to that motion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? 401, Tony. We will see everybody on Monday, September 11th, 2023. Any other discussions or comments for the good of the order?
Close the meeting.
Seeing none, motion's been made by Mr. Ellis to adjourn.
Second.
Motion's been made and second by Mr. Cohen to adjourn. Any discussion in regards to that motion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? 401, it's 8:54, we are adjourned.